Hey everybody, this is Chris Roscoe. It's Operation Moksha. And have you ever noticed that sometimes doing your personal work, your internal work, taking care of yourself and doing all that shit can kind of mess with your social life? Maybe sometimes you need to stay in your room and hermit for what seems like way too long. And while you're doing that, maybe your friends are getting upset with you. Maybe they're thinking you don't like them anymore. Maybe they're getting their feelings hurt. Maybe all kinds of shit that's happening. Maybe they're getting mad. And maybe you're straight up losing friends because all you want to do is get your shit together. What do you do in those circumstances? Well, I'm going to give you at least a partial answer because somebody reached out to me with this question. And so I'm going to explain it as best I can because I am very familiar with this. When I first started getting my shit together, I lost just about all my friends. As you may or may not know, I was like a homeless anarchist punk in high school. And so, my friends were either junkies or on their way to become junkies, or they sold out and got some stupid job that they didn't really like. And basically my friends were either they weren't aligned with me. Let's say that. I had my sights set on somewhere that a lot of my friends growing up weren't or didn't have. And so I ended up losing a lot of friends because of it. And I also had this experience where in recovering from a lifetime of severe mental illness, I did actually have to lock myself in my room fairly often, just in order to be able to do the work necessary to maintain a basic living. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience and some of the things that I've learned. So first of all, the thing I want to clear up is that it's very, very likely that if you've had a group of friends, let's say, or any number of friends, or long-term relationship even, family even, anybody you've known for a long enough period of time, you settle into these relationship dynamics, right? Where you say, here's what you can expect from me, right? And then you basically say, here's what I expect from you. And if that goes on long enough, being unchallenged, we start to relax into that and depend on it in some kind of a not necessarily codependent, like kind of, but it doesn't necessarily have to start out toxic until one of you starts to change, right? So if I'm getting my emotional needs met by you being a doormat, and suddenly you start asserting boundaries, and suddenly you have concerns of your own, I'm not getting my emotional needs met anymore. And because I don't know how to meet my emotional needs on my own, I'm going to freak the fuck out because it's like, oh my God, my safety, my certainty, my whatever, it's being threatened because this person is asserting boundaries and making healthy decisions for themselves. What do we do? Like, this is a joke, but this is actually what happens. People end up getting dependent on you being the unhealthy version of yourself. And so when you start to change, you go through a personal emotional upheaval, and that kind of forces everybody who was dependent on you being the way you were to go through a similar upheaval. And a good way to tell who's worth spending time with and who's worth committing to is how they relate to this kind of upheaval. Because there's going to be people that talk to you about it. There's going to be people that are understanding and will try and learn how to grow and or at least cope. And then there's other people that'll just get mad about it and be like, you're changing. You didn't used to do blah, blah, blah. Like, you having boundaries will suddenly mean that you're selfish. Or you wanting to charge for your services means that you're a sellout. Or whatever the fuck. Whatever stories you used to tell each other in order to keep yourselves here, once you get here, suddenly you're the one all that shit starts to get projected on. Where for me, like being a homeless anarchist punk as a kid, the rich people, the sellouts, like the worst thing you could be as a punk is a sellout. There's nothing worse. Maybe a Nazi. Sellouts and Nazis are pretty much the devil boogeymen of the punk rock scene. Worst things you can be. And so, I started selling coaching, my services, and there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of like, you sell out, like, why aren't you giving away your stuff for free, bro? And like all the bullshit you used to tell each other to keep yourselves here suddenly gets projected on you when you're here. So I don't need to go any further into that than I have. So know that that's potentially the case. And since that is potentially the case, it's also worth knowing that it doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. That you can decide which friends are worth committing to, which friends are worth talking to about this, and which friends are worth closing that divide and really communicating to them what's happening with you and what you need and what you want and how much you still really care for them. All that stuff is really, really valuable still. But you may also very likely have to take stock of who isn't worth your time anymore. Like I've even recently had to drop some friends just because the impact that they were having on my life wasn't good. Like there's just shit you can tolerate at a certain point, and then when you grow, it's just not tolerable anymore. Like the dull, negligible pain, when you become more aware, suddenly gets louder and louder, and you're like, fuck, I can't deal with this anymore. I have to let it go. And so that's very likely to happen. It's very likely to happen. Now, as far as the actual process of hermiting yourself, this one can be a little bit tricky because it's easy to fall into hermit mode and just stay there. It's easy to do internal work like meditation or energy work or shadow work or whatever the fuck. And it's easy to stay in that loop and never actually turn it into anything exterior. Like, I remember reading, I think it was Paths to God by Ram Dass, where he talks about not being attached to the practices themselves, because the practices are a means to an end. And so you don't want to get attached to the practices, because if you get too attached to the practices, you could spend your whole life meditating and doing shadow work and chanting if you chant, or whatever the thing for you might be. You can spend all your time doing that in preparation to get out into the world and then never fucking get there. And it's a cycle that people can spin themselves in very, very easily, and it's an avoidant thing. So know that if you do need to hermit yourself, to watch whether or not you're actually doing it as a means to avoid your life and yourself and your responsibilities and your dreams, because that's very, very possible. And the other thing to know is that, so this one is, I'm going to have to unpack something here, because you have to use your intuition. Because when you start integrating these different parts of your personality, you have to lead with a part of yourself sometimes that isn't entirely conscious. And I'm going to tell you what I mean. So when you're integrating new parts of yourself, you're integrating things that are unconscious, right? So the thing I'm currently integrating in my life are these two polar opposite extremes. One is this like hopeless romantic version of myself that doesn't see flaws in people, that doesn't see any need to protect myself from anything, that just loves people the way they are. That's one side of me. And then the other side of me, the polar opposite of me, these are the two most polar opposites I'm currently aware of within my psyche. And the one all the way over here is very untrusting of people. And it's like, who the fuck are you? Why should I trust you? What have you done? Like here's my boundaries, and you better fucking prove to me that you're worth coming close to me. Like, I have two very distinct parts of my personality, and I'm trying to integrate them and getting them to see eye to eye so that I can love people, but also know when and how to protect myself and what questions to ask. And I want to be able to see people's shadow just as well as I can see mine. And so I have to balance these two. Now, as I'm doing it, these things are so out of my awareness. Like, I can't see both of them at the same time right now as I'm going on in my everyday life. So I have to trust that because I meditate 3 times a day, and because I stay focused on this, and because I have my intentions that I set twice a day, and I reflect on these things, I have to trust that my unconscious mind is integrating while I'm not doing it consciously. Because what happens is you set your mind on a goal, and your unconscious mind goes, okay, I have a vague idea of how to get there, and it starts putting pieces together, and that's what your intuition essentially is. Your intuition is your unconscious mind, because you're only aware of a very small fraction of your reality. I don't remember exactly how much it is. But your conscious mind can only take in a very small fraction of reality. So your unconscious mind is doing most of the work. It's digging deep inside to all the stuff you forgot you ever knew about, and it's putting pieces together based on pieces of information that you aren't even aware that you saw. And it's using all of these things in this massive calculation to try and figure out where you should go. And it's using your unconscious emotions as guideposts to tell you, like, oh, that's a hint, that's a hit, that's a hit. That's essentially what intuition is. So you have to trust who you're becoming in order to really know how to use your intuition. You have to say, I have my eye set on becoming this person, and I trust my unconscious mind to identify patterns for me and to identify opportunities and to identify all these little things that I'm not consciously aware of and put them together as the next best guess for where to go to become who I'm trying to become. Hope to God that made sense. It made sense to me, so I hope it was clear enough for you. Now, the reason I'm bringing up in this particular context is because when it comes time to stay in your room and meditate or do work or whatever it is you need to do versus going out and hanging out with your friends and living life and being creative and all that shit, there's going to be times when you do need to sit at home and meditate and do whatever. Then there's going to be other times you need to go out and live. Me personally, I like to use my intuition to tell me which one's which. Where I know where I'm going, I know who I'm becoming, and I let my unconscious be my intuitive guide to tell me which directions are going to take me there quicker. So if I genuinely feel in my heart of hearts that the right thing to do is to stay home and meditate, I'll do it. And if after I've explained where I'm at, if after I've communicated, if somebody still has a problem with it, then fuck them. But if I have communicated where I'm at and somebody completely understands where I'm at and what I need, and they, granted, as long as I haven't, canceled like within 30 minutes before I'm supposed to be at the place and the person's already there waiting for me, like as long as I wasn't a dick, if the person understands, then that's a homie that I'm willing to keep close. And as long as I haven't been a dick and the person gets mad, then it's like, okay, maybe you got some shit you need to work out. Maybe we have some conversations we need to have, but you keep acting like this and I'm not going to keep you around much longer. Now, your intuition will also sometimes tell you to go out and do things that are normal, things are not normal, things that are scary for you, things that are new for you. And you have to be able to tune into where you're going and use your felt intuition to give you a general close approximation of what's going to take you there. And at any given moment, all you're ever going to be able to do is follow your intuition, which is essentially a well-educated and well-intentioned guess. So you're going to have to take a well-intentioned guess in order to figure out what to do at what point. And the number one thing I've found to tune your intuition is to get the felt sense of what it's going to be like to be the person you're becoming. Get a felt sense of what kind of steps it would take in order to become that person. See if you can feel that as often as possible, and then take action steps that feel in alignment with that. It's like, oh, with this person that I'm becoming, what would they do in this situation? Like, what action can I take that makes me feel closest to the way I want to feel, or the way that the future version of me will feel? How can I take actions in alignment with that? Do I need to sit the fuck home and meditate for a day and a half? Because I do that sometimes. Sometimes I'll spend an entire day just smoking a ton of weed so that my emotions are all up in my face so I can't ignore them. And then I'll work on them for hours at a time. Do whatever I need to do. Other times I'll sit here and I'll create content for an entire fucking day if I feel like it. And I do whatever I think the version of me that I'm becoming, if he were to look back and he were to say, that was a good call, that's what I try to do. And I use my intuition to tell me what that is. And so sometimes that can mean staying inside for longer than you think you should. Sometimes that can mean taking a break from being creative longer than you think you should. But sometimes that means going out and doing scary things. Sometimes that means doing things while you're terrified. Sometimes that means doing brand new things you've never done before. And so you could hurt people. That's a part of the process. You're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to deal with whether or not you have integrity in those moments. And then you're going to have to deal with the level of integrity that the people in your life show up to in response to you essentially shifting the emotional foundation of the relationship. There's a lot to factor in here, and I hope I've covered at least enough of it to give you an idea. But basically, use your intuition, trust who you're becoming, and trust that as long as you behave with intention and integrity along the path, when you become the version of you that you want to become, you're going to have the right people around you. And you're going to have the people that respect your boundaries and respect your direction, respect where you're going, and respect who the fuck you are and what you're all about. And because you will have conducted yourself with integrity on the path there, that it's going to be mutual, and they're going to know that you love them and respect them and all that shit, and it's going to be great. So even if you do lose friends on the path, trust that you'll meet new and better ones and develop relationships based on things that matter rather than just unconscious emotional conditioning. So I hope this helped. I'm going to stop because I try to keep the shit at 15 minutes. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you think I'm full of shit, let me know too. I love you. See ya.